Hey guys, it's Macy, back with Macy's Reading Corner, reading I Survived the American Revolution, 1776. You might hear my cat throughout this because she's in here with me, but I think we're on chapter 3, if I can find the page. Nate stood very still. "Are you a pirate?" Nate asked. "Yes," the voice said, "a pirate. And I want my twaddle." Nate's heart lifted up. He whirled around to face his attacker, 3-year-old Theo, Eliza's little boy. He was waving his pirate sword and a spindly stick from the cherry tree. Theo was supposed to be napping, out of Storch's sight, but there he was, wide awake. "You're very fierce," Nate told his friend. Theo stood proudly, his brown eyes gleaming like polished gold. He'd been wild about pirates for months now, ever since Nate started telling him stories about his adventures at sea. Theo waved his stick sword. "Arg!" he shouted in his most pirate-like voice. Nate grabbed Theo around the waist and picked him up. Theo's happy giggles rose up, whooshing over Nate like a breeze. Seconds later, Eliza came rushing out of the house, her skirt swirling around her shoes. Eliza had Theo's same dark brown skin and big bright eyes. But unlike Theo's, Eliza wasn't smiling. "You both need to hush," she warned, looking towards the house. "You know what he could do if he hears." He, of course, was Storch. He had no patience for giggling, and even less for Theo himself. Eliza's worst nightmare was that Storch would sell Theo, just like she'd sold Eliza's husband, Gregory, a few months before Nate arrived. Eliza rarely talked about Gregory. It hurt her too much. Nate knew. But she had told Nate a few things about her husband, that he was joyful like Theo and had the same bright eyes, that not 1 hour went by without her missing him. What a fool Nate was, getting Theo all riled up. Luckily, Storch was probably too busy cursing George Washington to notice Theo's giggles. "Mama," Theo said quietly, "I a pirate." Eliza's eyes softened, and she and Nate shared a little smile. "Even pirates have to be quiet," Eliza said, kissing Theo on the nose, "or they get into trouble." Storch's voice bellowed from the house. "Cake!" "I'll keep this pirate out of trouble," Nate promised. Eliza rushed inside to serve Storch and his friend. Theo put his face close to Nate's. "Tell a pirate story," Theo begged. "Tell me about Slash." Slash was Slash O'Shea, the greatest living pirate. Nate had grown up hearing Papa's story about Slash, and Nate had shared most of them with Theo. Slash got his name from the dagger strapped to the stump where his hand used to be. Some pirates were nothing more than low-life thieves. They captured ships and stole everything they could. They murdered anyone who got in their way. Not Slash. He'd never killed a man. And he gave some of his treasure away, mostly to orphans. He'd sneak into cities disguised as a ragged beggar in clothes and hand out gold coins to kids living on the streets. "I'll tell you a Slash story later," said Nate. "How about a song?" A grin spread across Theo's face. He loved it when Nate sang shanties, the songs sailors crooned as they did their work. Nate sang Theo one of Papa's favorites. It was about the sun rising up over the sea. Soon enough, Theo's eyes were closed. Nate gently pried the stick sword from Theo's hand. He lifted his little friend up and carried him to a soft patch of grass. Then Nate went back to his weeds and worms. Storch and Martin had finished their cake and were puffing on cigars. They were still talking about the war. "Don't worry, my friend, this war will be over soon," Storch was saying. "The king sent hundreds of ships. The big battle is coming any day. Washington and his army of traitors will soon be crushed." Martin nodded his jolly face in agreement. Nate didn't pay much attention to the war. He understood what it was about, whether the 13 American colonies should stay a part of England or become a country of their own. He remembered the late-night talks on Papa's ship. Nate would lie in his hammock and listen to Papa and the men griping about England and King George. There was no mention of the war back then. Most of the men were proud that America was part of England, the most powerful country on earth. But they hated paying so many taxes, the extra money England made the colonists pay when they'd bought things like tea and paper. They started to see King George as a bully who didn't care about the people who lived in the colonies. Their fiery discussions would last deep into the night. Nate would struggle to stay awake. He never wanted to miss a word of what they were saying. But now Nate couldn't care about King George. It didn't matter to him who won the war. Whatever happened, he was pretty sure Eliza and Theo would still be slaves, Papa would still be gone, and Nate would still be stuck here, pulling up Storch's weeds. Nate stopped listening to Storch and Martin. Time crawled by. The front door banged open, and Mr. Martin walked out to his waiting carriage. Storch stood outside and waved goodbye as he puffed on a cigar. It was right then that Nate realized that Theo wasn't asleep in the grass anymore. Nate scanned the yard until he spotted the little boy. He was next to the house, a few yards from Storch. Theo had found a new pirate sword, an enormous stick almost as big as he was. He was spinning around and around like a top. The stick whipped around with him. Storch had his back turned and he couldn't see Theo. Just then Theo stumbled and the stick slipped from his hands. It flew surprisingly fast like a spear, and it was heading right for Storch's head. Nate's heart stopped. He opened his mouth to scream out a warning, but it was too late. Thwack! The stick smashed Storch right on the back of the head. He cursed in pain, and then Nate's uncle fell to the ground like an empty sack. Chapter 4. Nate's mind swirled. He was afraid he might vomit. It wasn't Storch's moans of pain that sickened him. It was knowing what would happen to Theo. Storch would sell him for sure. Eliza would lose him forever, just like she'd lost her husband Gregory. Nate rushed over to Theo, who was trying to hide behind the cherry tree. Nate lifted Theo up and hugged him close. Eliza was on the porch now, bending down to help Storch. Eliza looked up. She spotted Nate and Theo. Her eyes locked with Nate's, and in that split second, Nate could see she understood exactly what happened. Nate had to get Theo out of there. "Don't worry," Nate whispered to Theo. "I won't let anything happen to you." But Nate's words seemed to scatter in the wind. Of course he couldn't just run off with Theo. Theo wasn't just any little boy. He was a slave. To Storch, Theo wasn't a person. He was a valuable property. Storch wouldn't let him go. He'd hire slave catchers. He'd offer a fat reward. He'd never stop looking. There was nothing Nate could do to help Theo, unless an idea flickered in Nate's mind like a little flame. Storch hadn't seen Theo